Welcome to Conscious Insights, Strategies for Leadership Evolution. Engage in roundtable discussions that spark deep dialogue with executives and thought leaders to advance conscious leadership and explore innovative practices. Join us and gain insights that will elevate your leadership journey. Hello and welcome to this episode of Conscious Insights. Today I have some amazing guests, and we're going to be talking about elevating perspective, leadership transformation in Nepal. Today, joining me is Luis Benitez and Mark Gasta, who have incredible experience both in Nepal and in leadership. So let me tell you a little bit about them, and then we'll jump right in and really let you all speak to your amazing experiences and perspectives. So first of all, Luis has summited the top of the famed 7 summits a cumulative 32 times, including being a 6-time summiteer of Mount Everest. So he has some experience in Nepal. Because of this, between managing expeditions on some of the most remote peaks in the world while also working in the public and private sectors, he works to tie the lessons available from the outdoors and carry them back to the everyday challenges of life and business, while also holding a keen focus on the global development and advancement of the outdoor industry. He spent a decade managing the well-established leadership development school Outward Bound, and also served as the COO and Director of Operations for Adventure Consultants. He has reported from Mount Everest for ABC News, which is pretty exciting. And one thing about Luis is that he's always focused on servant leadership. So some of his most rewarding work has been to help create the internal university for Vail Resorts that focused on leadership development for every level of employee. He's also worked with the VF Corporation and several other organizations, as well as creating a nonprofit trekking for kids. There's lots more to learn about Luis, and I'll put, hopefully we'll learn more of that directly from you, Luis, as well as I'll put that in the show notes. And then Mark Gasta is a teaching professor and associate director for the Outdoor Recreation Economy program at the University of Colorado Boulder. He's also the founder of Adventures in Leading, a leadership team culture development group that works to connect leaders and teams to their purpose and potential. Prior to joining academia, Mark was the executive vice president, chief people officer, and chief sustainability officer for Vail Resorts. Before Vail, Mark served as a corporate vice president for organizational development for Comcast and its 90,000 employees. And he's also served in other leadership roles, as well as in the United States Army as a commissions officer and aviator. So as you can see, I have some pretty experienced and amazing humans on the episode today. So thank you both for being here. I think what I'd love to hear from you is a little bit more about yourself, your experiences in Nepal, and even particularly with the Sherpa people, and anything that comes from that, why that's been important to you, how that relates. So the question is the question, but I'm really curious what's coming from your heart when I ask that.
Let's start with you, Luis. Oh boy. Okay. Thanks, Mark. And thanks, Renelle, for having me. A real pleasure. You know, I spent over a decade working in Nepal, pretty consistently, year after year with the Sherpa people, and also the other tribes that are in Nepal and in Tibet, of which the Sherpa community is one. So I tell people at that time of my life, I really did grow up in Nepal, a significant portion of my 20s and my 30s, working in both Tibet and Nepal. And I think, having a culture and a community so steeped in not only the Buddhist religion, but in service to others. And, you hear all the time in Western societies about random acts of kindness and selflessness. And truly, this is a culture and a community that is steeped in both of those things, not for seeking a higher level of reward, but just because it's embedded into the fabric of the culture. So growing up in the midst of all of that and a part of all that, it was I feel like that community really infused my point of view with respect to leadership, effective communication, culture, and to watch that change over the last current decade. It's been really interesting to follow.
Yeah.
Mark?
Yeah, I don't have nearly the amount of experience in Nepal as Luis does, but yeah, I second everything he says. A rich culture, a very, very strong sense of community and traditions, deep connection to the mountains, obviously, and the awe associated with the mountains, which is so powerful, which I know we'll talk later about probably as it relates to experiential leadership. They're warm, they're friendly, they're relaxed. And one of the things I love about them is just the wisdom. Luis brought up the idea of wisdom of serving others and the wisdom of sustainable living, the wisdom of coexisting with nature and being one. And there's so much to learn from that.
Yeah, absolutely. So we've all been in Nepal, just for our audience. Luis has spent the most time in Nepal and probably seen more of Nepal than Mark or I, for sure. I was in Nepal in 2022 and trekked to Everest Base Camp, and it was every bit as awe-inspiring as I thought it would be. And along the way, there were so many points of transformation that I could just imagine sitting with leaders and taking in what we were learning, whether it was a physical challenge that day, whether it was something we learned from the culture, and utilizing that to make shift. And I think, Mark, you went in 2023, is that correct? And
Correct, yes.
and also went to Everest Base Camp, but you went during climbing season. When I was
Correct.
not there during climbing season. So you saw Everest Base Camp full of climbers. Yeah.
Yeah, incredible experience. Just amazing to be there and hear the stories and see the hard work and effort and celebrate with those that were successful. It's an incredibly powerful journey. And to your point about the transformation that can happen, and when we get outside, when we're exposed to something bigger than ourselves, when we contemplate along a stream or next to a fire versus in a conference room about who we are and what we believe, when we're pushed a little bit and get a little bit vulnerable based on, some of our self-imposed boundaries, all of a sudden we can have a real conversation about life and leadership and service and legacy. It's powerful.
Yeah, absolutely. And Luis, one thing before we did this interview that you were really intentional about and I really appreciated was asking me like what do you mean by we're doing a program in 2025, which we'll talk about later, called the Sherpa Way. And you asked, what do you mean by that? Because I know the Sherpa people really well, and I want to make sure that that is represented correctly, which we learned, right, that we're also ensuring that the Sherpa people, because we're partnering with a Sherpa run company. But I would love for you to talk a little bit more about that. I so appreciated how important that was to you, but I think that's also a key of the type of transformation that can happen in Nepal, is being amongst that culture.
Yeah, I mean, thanks for pointing that out. Because I think for the longest time, and I've watched this evolution in my lifetime. I'll sort of focus on the history a little bit, just so people understand. The Sherpa culture is truly the culture and the people that live in the valleys around the highest peaks in the Himalayas. The term Sherpa literally translates to mean man from the east. So this is the tribe that migrated over the high passes from Tibet and settled in the high mountain valleys. So this is really the tribe that works on the high peaks with Western and European climbers, and gets the most access to that sort of global mentality. And I think for the longest time, that community, and you saw it reflected in mountaineering literature, is so-and-so, insert name of Western or European climber here, summited, insert name of peak, with Sherpa team. And so there was this broad generalization of these people and of this culture that really didn't bring a true, in my opinion, respect and honor to what to what they're all about. I mean, you still hear it kind of used as much as a verb and an adjective. I'm Sherpa-ing this stuff up the hill, or, oh, you were my Sherpa, you carried my bags to my room. So, it's really one of those things that it would be like saying, I'm Italianing this pizza because there's some kind of connectivity to the act and what was going on. So, and because of this sense of selflessness and service from the community, there was really no effort placed on it. But only in the last 10 years have you really seen this effort from Western and European companies to not only honor the individual that's doing these experiences with them, but also provide a deeper education to the community as well, about leadership, about running a business. So much so to the fact that now you're seeing Sherpa-led companies all over the Himalayas that are garnering their own clientele, running their own expeditions, where the Western guides are really the guests. And at the end of the day, the resources that we're leveraging are within their country. It's their backyard. And sort of that obligation of really understanding how they codify leadership and effective communication and what our role in that education can and should be, has really been an evolutionary process, from the early 1920s when the Swiss were first on Everest, to present day.
Awesome. I love that. And I know that when people use the term Sherpa to meaning carry things, I now always correct them and say, that's actually not correct. You're talking about a porter. Sherpa are a group of people. And
Exactly.
and I can't help myself every single time. So, yeah. Mark, what was your experience? Similar, when you were over there, there's definitely the awe of the Himalayas, and we will get to that because that's transformational in and of itself. But when you, I know when I was guided, we had Western guides, but yes, they were guests. On our trek, we were led by a Sherpa-owned company, and the Sherpa people were in charge, and the Western guides just helped to translate some things, not language, but just translate the way of being, helping us. What was your experience with the Sherpa tribe?
Well, I have a dear friend of Luis and of mine, who runs a North American Seven Summit guide company. And so I did reach out to him and said, Ryan, will you hook me up with some guides so that we can go visit him at Everest Base Camp while he was there with the climbing team. But our guides through the entire journey were two Sherpa gentlemen. So we had no Western influence with us during that experience. It was with them directly until we got to base camp. And when we got to there, we met Ryan and his climbing team. And there was obviously Western influence associated at that point. But these are gentlemen that he had worked with forever. So it was really a unique experience in which, we explained to them we would appreciate as authentic of an experience as we can possibly receive. And I think as a result, they really enjoyed sharing their traditions with us and giving us different experiences that maybe some of the Western guide companies would not be getting.
Right. And I know something, at least in my life and in my group, that's a big thing in the Western society is time. Where how long is this going to take? How many miles are we hiking? And that was one of the big things that we learned, is that we've got to take you got to take a different look at time, and a different look at miles. It might take us 3 hours today, and today will be kind of a hard day. And how much are we climbing? And it's like, I don't know. Cause in the Himalayas, you climb up and then you climb down and then you climb up and then you climb down. And so there's such a different way of experiencing. So you're both mountain climbers. And Luis, you've led many mountains. But did either of you, working with the Sherpa people, experience being led in the outdoors differently than, say, we do things in the US or in the Western society?
I'll jump in first because Luis will have a lot more content on this than I do with so much more experience. But I had exactly that experience, Renelle. When we were planning this, right, we're like, well, how far do we go each day and how long will we be trapped? I mean, that's our norm, right? That's the way we think. And they really couldn't even explain to us. I mean, their minds just weren't operating that way. It's kind of like, no, we're going to spend the day every day trekking. And, it was less about, I mean, literally, I couldn't get an answer of how far each day and how long will it take. It's just it'll take what it takes. Luis?
Yeah, I mean, I'm smiling, but because it's one of those things. What I would always tell clients, and this sort of ties into the mentality that Mark's talking about, is you can't fake your way or rationalize or talk your way up a hill or up a mountain. You have to be very honest internally and externally with what's going on. You try to push too hard, you don't acclimate, you get sick for some reason. You stop listening to that internal barometer, and sort of think, pushing is the way and the answer. Never works well. And so I tell people a lot that, mountaineering can be both the most selfish and the most honest thing you would ever do. And I think, the mentality of the Sherpa community, around that, they, and I say they in a very broad context, some of my dearest friends who are Sherpa think it's hysterical to watch the Western mindset, approach to, well, listen, I got 2 weeks. Okay. So we gotta be here tonight. We gotta be there tomorrow. And if we're not, there's going to be trouble. And, the reality is that, there's a lot of letting go when it comes to travel, in Nepal, and also when it comes to, just the overall approach. Now, that letting go, I think the Western mindset sort of hears that and thinks that, oh, that's a really lazy, lopsided approach. But when the reality is, it is, to have mental flexibility, with what's going on around you, with respect to how do you react and respond to everything that's going on, in my opinion, is sort of the highest form of leadership and effective communication. And that adaptability, I think, is built in. And most of my Sherpa friends find it incredibly funny, to watch these agendas roll up the valley and just completely fall apart, from weather or illness, or, I mean, you name it. Ingrown toenail. I mean, the list of things that can impact what's going on, is a mile long. And we would often have these conversations in tea houses, going up valley, that the people that are used to finishing in first place, be it in anything, in sport, in life, in anything, the Himalayas usually drive them really crazy. And I would say a significant portion of those people end up going home early because their mental construct just can't handle the flexibility that's required. And to a certain extent, I think they can, but then it gets to a certain point, they're like, this is nuts. We've been weathered out for 10 days. I don't, I don't like it. Do something. Well, what am I going to do? Like, you can't move the clouds off. What I tell people is the people that are used to finishing second through fifth place in life are usually the ones that do really well. And most of my Sherpa friends agree, because they say these are the people that are used to, getting brought to their knees or being really challenged by things, but somehow find the tenacity to keep getting back on their feet and putting one foot in front of the other, and are really flexible about the process. So, in my experience, both in the valley and on the mountain, that mindset and letting go of some of those things. I've found that when I fly into Kathmandu before expeditions, I mean, leading an expedition on Everest or any other mountain in the Himalayas as a guide and as an expedition leader is this massive exercise in logistics. You can't stop counting Snicker bars and how many potatoes you have and what's moving where, when, why, and how. That's your job. But at some point, all that logistics needs to be turned over to the art of the possible and what is possible out there. And it, you know, these multi-million dollar expeditions, whether they like it or not, have to leave room for that magic. And I guess the last thing I'll share with you before quieting down for a bit is every Sherpa believes that a god or goddess lives on the summit of every single mountain in the Himalayas. And I see prayer flags behind you, and no Sherpa will climb on any mountain without a puja. Now, a puja is a blessing ceremony where a monk will come up valley from a local monastery, burn juniper, say prayers, bless all the Sherpas, bless the team that's with the Sherpas, and then climbing can begin. And these dates are preordained in a calendar that is not like the calendar that you and I know, but a calendar based on religious text. So a multi-million dollar expedition might hoof it up valley, deal with all the uncertainty, get everything set up at base camp, be ready to go. And it's Monday afternoon, and they sit down with their Sherpas and say, okay, we're set. Tuesday morning, it's time to go to work. The Sherpas will look at the expedition leaders, right? And say, well, according to the calendar, best day for puja is next Thursday. So we're not going anywhere. And I've seen this happen over and over again. People go, what do you mean? Like, we're here. Tomorrow's Tuesday. You're telling me we got to wait a week before we start? And they're like, well, we're going to wait a week. You can do whatever you want. But we're not climbing until the puja ceremony happens. And I have watched disrespectful companies and climbers start moving before the puja happens. And it just, like, the level, Sherpas won't say anything about it, but the level of disrespect has just been mind-boggling sometimes. So, this letting go and this finding a little bit of room for that magic is incredibly important within the culture.
Absolutely. We also we weren't climbing. For me, it felt like I was climbing a mountain going to Everest Base Camp, but we weren't climbing the bigger mountains, with the exception of one 18,000 foot mountain that we climbed that felt big. And we also had a puja in Lugla, and we were not going to go without that. Absolutely. And I want to ask you both. So we're talking about all of these differences over in Nepal. What can we learn and bring back into the West, especially as the complexity of what we're dealing with on a daily basis starts to change? Like, do we go over there and just say, that's interesting, that's how the Sherpa people do things, but I'm getting back to the West? Or is there an opportunity for us to say, wow, this is something we can learn from and we can bring back?
Yeah, there's so much we can learn from, right? I mean, more generally, and then we can get specifically into Nepal, just the value of expanding your global worldview and the personal growth and understanding it has on you as an individual, a person, a leader. And it also has so much to do with mental well-being, right? I mean, your mindfulness, your personal fulfillment, and obviously greater appreciation and empathy for others. So, just having the opportunity to experience something like Nepal and be in that situation where there's so much awe, really enhances, our joy, our gratitude, our contentment. And it gives us the opportunity to contemplate who are we and what do we believe? And especially being in such a spiritual place where people, as Luis pointed out earlier, are so focused on serving one another, and they're so focused on community, and they're so focused on things like sustainability, just really what's it all about, and how do I want to live and lead, and what ultimately will be my legacy. So it's powerful.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think it's everything that we've talked about, but I think I would also want to address the opportunity that we have for that door to swing both ways, right? I think that the highest art of what we're talking about is a blending of both ideologies and both cultures. And if you do look at the last 10 years of the Sherpa community. And as these, my frame of reference is the guiding industry. As a lot of Sherpa-owned companies have come online, there was a year where Sherpas felt this unfair power dynamic. They felt that there were disparities with not only pay but also presence on a lot of the big mountains. And there was a year where Sherpas actually went on strike on Everest. And when I talked to some of the younger business owners and some of the Sherpas, about like why did you choose this mechanism for what you're doing, getting your point across? And he looked me square in the eye and said, "We learned it from you. We learned our business practices from the Western business mindset, and what we learned was, bottom line above all else, take care of your own, and that while the way we approach things is nice and important, we have to be like you to compete with you." And so it started this renaissance of us asking ourselves, what are we responsible for leadership development within that community? What is the mindset that we're bringing to the table? And to your question, what can we take back with us? Because I think when you look at the best of what we would have to offer, you see things like the Khumbu Climbing School, which is a climbing school that, all the business owners, all the Sherpa business owners now, not only learn technical skills at the Khumbu Climbing School, but also learn some of the business acumen that got them beyond that sort of static Western MBA mentality, to really how to incorporate both of them together. And I think that's really the magic of what's possible here. Because I think if you walk into any Western boardroom and you say, "Hey, listen, just leave a little bit of room for magic. Let's just all step back and what will be, will be." Full disclosure, Mark has been my boss in a former lifetime. He's tried that on me before. I've worked in the Himalayas for a really long time. And there have been moments where I've wanted to take Mark and that mindset and throw it right out the window. But I think the journey towards, it's not saying it once or twice. It's not giving it lip service. If you're going to do it, and I do credit Mark for when we were working together, really believing in this in the face of adversity, you have to do it day after day after day after day. And eventually communities, people, companies start to come around, see the value.
Absolutely. And I love the point that you're making is it's not that we're doing something completely wrong in the West and we need to go over to Nepal and learn something and bring it back. We're talking about, hey, the other societies are learning from some of our practices, and there's some practices that are great practices. And then there's some that we can bring back and bridge some of our, I think we have a little too much linear and rational thinking going on in the West right now, and that with the complexity that we're facing, we need more heart. We need more intuition. And that's what I felt and saw in numerous different ways when I was in Nepal. When we had a couple of things go pretty wrong and had some people get sick, and to watch the way our Sherpa leaders handled that with such grace and such ease, and yet really took it seriously and really stood their ground for what needed to happen was beautiful. And I don't see that as much in the US specifically. And I think we have room for it. I think it's really powerful.
I couldn't agree more with that, right? I mean, we really try to prioritize our head, our intellect, and our hands, getting stuff done. But you say we need more heart, right? I'll differentiate that, say there's the being and doing, right? Doing
Yes.
is head and hands, and being is the heart, right? And the opportunity to really, really tap into that as a leader, as a person. That differentiates good leadership and great leadership, right? Time and time again, research demonstrates that, if I asked you who had the biggest impact on your life and what was it about them that had the impact, it's all about heart. They believed in me. They were authentic. I could trust them. They developed me. They supported me. And so there's a lot we can learn from that culture, the Nepalese culture, and who they are and how they live their lives.
Absolutely. And you both know a little bit about the trek that we are partnering with a company called Sherpa Mountain Adventures in October of 2025 with a gentleman named Jeff Clem that you both know that's partnering with me on that. So Jeff and I would be the leadership coaches, but our Sherpa counterparts are in charge, especially in Kathmandu. And I'm curious with your experience. We have the 5 ways of the Sherpa, and we call this program the Sherpa Way, Leadership Transformation in Nepal. And our leader, Karma Sherpa, said, let's start this out. It'll be an intellectual list. It will just be this nicely written intellectual list. And then we go over there and people will understand and embody and come back. Understanding that so much more. And I'll just read them. I won't read with all the meanings to them, but then I would love to have some of your perspective on why do you think it would be a good idea for us to take 12 leaders over to Nepal, and what kind of transformation could be possible? So let me just talk about the 5 ways of the Sherpa. Root in strength and simplicity, weave strong ties, see it as it is, attune to the environment, and elevate joy.
Yeah, I mean, I think those are all good. The in hearing those and just sort of top of mind, the 2 things that stand out are what you just talked about, which was even in the midst of being gentle, find the way to be firm if needed. So it's sort of compassion through conviction. That might be the wrong set of words, but that's sort of, I would see it all the time, with a smile saying, "I'm sorry," insert name of client, but you're going down, and that's just what's going to happen right now. But the other thing I think, and this is something that with a Western mindset and depending on what your cultural nuances are, might land differently, but discover your religion. And I use religion in sort of a broad context. The Sherpa community and culture, and all of my male Sherpa friends. Obviously, there are Sherpanis as well, which are the female Sherpas. All my male Sherpa friends, the Sherpas, like to joke and be like, "Okay, out of the whole household, one brother's got to go to the monastery. So let's all draw straws and figure out who's going to go become a monk." And then a third of them said, "Yeah, I went and tried it, but it didn't really work out. And I like girls too much, or wanted to get out and just like being human, and so that's just the way it is." But regardless of the story and who went to the monastery and who didn't and why, and also Sherpanis go to the nunnery as well. So there's a female version of this. There's an incorporation of their understanding of not the letter of the law with respect to religion, but the spirit of things. The puja ceremony, classic example. So, marathon runners, they would say, running is my religion, quote unquote. Climbers, that physical activity, this is mine. Meditation, yoga, or even just flat out going to church. My religion is my religion. Find a way to make room for, that. Like, what is the thing that brings you the most center, the most peace, the most joy? And are you unrelenting in the practice of that? I have been in more storms than I can count, in moments in the mountains in the Himalayas where, thoughts definitely crossed my mind. Like, this is not looking good. Things could go even more wrong than they are now. And watching my friends, my Sherpa friends with prayer beads, saying prayers, sitting right next to me in the tent and on the trail, have brought me a level of comfort over the years that I can't even translate into words even now. So yeah, long-winded way of saying, find room for what is your version of religion and find a way to practice that. And then also that, I think that that compassion in the face, finding compassion even when you need to be a little bit more directive.
Thank you.
I've been in a couple of those storms with you, Luis. Matter of fact, there's some summits we got to go back and try again.
Yeah, Mark and I wasn't praying though during those times, Mark, and I probably should have been, but there you go.
You weren't as loving and caring as you're describing the Sherpas either.
That's fair. That's fair.
No, that's not true at all. There's Marge and Sarge in there, which is a story for another day. Story for another day.
Next podcast.
Yeah. Well, some of the things I pulled out of there, Renelle, I mean, that, we will gather from an experience like this. I mean, it's life-changing. It really potentially is. And it goes back to that idea of continuously expanding our global worldview and understanding how things fit together and having greater empathy for, all of our parts in it. But some of the specific things I heard in the words, right? The presence and mindfulness that it can help us create as we go back into our lives and lead our teams, the perseverance to be bold and to take some risks and to be vulnerable, and the confidence it takes to, kind of hold the line and the grit required to ultimately overcome. And when the chips are down, when things are hard, that's when things tend to go wrong. So the flexibility and the ability to be adaptable, and then supporting one another and encouraging one another. And ultimately, you said joy, I think, is the last one, the celebration associated with not just the accomplishment of making it to base camp, but of life and the beauty and the partnership and the collaboration and support that we gave each other. I mean, it's a really, really, experience of a lifetime, to steal from one of our old employers, Luis. It's an experience of a lifetime for sure.
Absolutely. And both of you allude to, or have said it, there's part of the experience over there for a leader, for a human, that we're not going to be able to put in words today, because you'll come back embodying something different and your presence will be different. And that's something we're not going to be able to put in words, versus maybe people have experienced one of us before we went and after we went and can notice that. But some of that we won't be able to put in words. People are going to have to, there's a part of their heart that's just going to have to trust that this is right for them. Yeah. As we conclude today, I would love to talk with you about Nepal for hours and hours, and I know that we don't have time for that. But what I would love is, for our listeners, is if you're a leader, if you're a future leader, and you might be considering something like this, maybe it's not Nepal, but in this case, we're excited to bring people to Nepal. What would you say to a leader considering this? Why might they do it? What might they get out of it? Could be something totally different than the question I'm asking, but that your heart feels would be really important to pass on.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of organizations and companies that try to replicate this somehow without, quote unquote, going. But I think having an experiential experience as a part of your leadership journey, whatever that experiential process is incredibly important for all the reasons that we've listed today. Doing it and doing these things sort of in a box just doesn't get you to the place that you need to be. And I think as an established leader, something like this reminds you of the magic and allows you to bring that back in. As an emerging leader, teaches you some of the lessons I think that are important to codify what your style and approach could or should be. So I think it's the experiential nature that I would say is important, whether you're emerging or seasoned, that's an experience like this would bring.
Thank you.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more, right? It's being put out of our comfort zone. It's experiencing something new and different that causes us to be introspective. And I know you and Jeff will help facilitate that along with your Sherpa partners. it's that resulting self-awareness around who am I and what I believe and what's most important to me, and actually codifying some of those things that maybe oftentimes we don't think about, like, well, what do I really value? And am I living in alignment or not with those values? Oftentimes tragedy has to strike before we wake up one day and say, how did I get here? I got here by default. And now I want to be more intentional. And when you go through that experiential, when you're introspective like that, when you begin to define these things that are most important to you, all of a sudden, then can you begin to live in alignment, right? Oftentimes, I like to say, if you don't know where you're going, every road gets you nowhere. We kind of end up in a life and a career by default. This will help us really define these things and align who you are with what you do. And when we're able to do that, we find success at unexpected moments. And when I say success, it's the broadest meaning of success. It's not just monetary success. It's all aspects. And we can't do that unless we're really clear on what it is we want and what we don't want.
Absolutely. Wow. Just speaking with you all for the last 30, 40 minutes, I might have been in my head before I came onto this call, but now I'm fully in my heart. I can feel myself in Nepal, and I can feel an excitement for, to your point earlier, Luis, helping to bridge. There's the greatness in the Western way, but there is greatness that we can bring back from Nepal, from those experiences. So thank you both for, one, sharing today, but also for the huge impact that you're making in the world through your leadership and through your experience.
Thank you for having me.
Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. And we'll talk soon. Maybe we'll have a part 2 and we'll get to hear this story about one of these mountains. Oh, looks like that might not be happening. That might not be a live aired. So you might have to hear that story offline sometime. All right. Well, thank you both and have a wonderful day. And thanks all for listening. For more information, visit insight-cc.com or email us at info@insight-cc.com. We look forward to hearing from you.